Costume design is for people who have to be costume designers. It's a vocation and an avocation. I was born to do it. It's about making wonderful movies, making wonderful opera, making wonderful theater. It's about suspension of disbelief. It's about telling the story. It's about being in the dark. Costume design is not about the clothes. Someone once said to me, costume, that's such a bad word for what you do. Because when the general public or the audience thinks about costume or costuming, they think about Halloween or fancy dress or dressing up. But in point of fact, the real truth about costume design is that all it needs to be is appropriate for the story. And in fact, the best costumes disappear and you're not aware of them at all. What we aspire to do as costume designers is to help the actor transform into a completely other person. So if we're asked to believe, and we are asked to believe, that every person in a story has a life before the story begins, and we're just meeting them at that moment in the theater, and we're just meeting them at the moment where the new story is starting, then their closet has to look like your closet. Their closets have to be filled with their personality, just like your closet is. And a costume designer has to know who that person is before we ever even think about trying to coordinate clothes for that individual. So that primarily what I'd like to say is that costume design is about the creation of a new person in a story. When a costume designer gets the call, keep in mind that that film can be any genre, any genre. It could be anything, a contemporary romantic comedy, it could be a Western, it could be some kind of Tudor picture, and it could be anything. If you have 5 directors and the words are exactly the same in a screenplay, you'll have 5 different films. And you know that that's true. If you think of 5 different directors and then add Tim Burton in that mix, or Wes Anderson in that mix, or Alfred Hitchcock in that mix, are those gentlemen or those ladies, Catherine Bigelow, are they going to make the same movie out of that screenplay? There's no way. So the costume designer reads the screenplay and then has that all-important first meeting with the filmmaker. And then the filmmaker tells the costume designer, the production designer designs the where, costume designer designs the who, the people in the screenplay, the cinematographer designs the mood of the screenplay. So that filmmaker, who is the center of our wagon wheel, has to tell me the story once again. And then we start the collaborative process. Then we start talking about the story and the people in the story and how that director is going to tell the story, because that's what's important. Filmmaking is the director's medium. It's not the writer's medium. The director will also tell me who he or she is considering casting for this screenplay, because I can't dress people without the casting, because the actors bring so much of their personality to each and every character. So this collaborative effort, this team effort, is what finally is the key to cinematic storytelling. As costume designers, we know that every movie is a costume movie. In 2001, I became the president of the Costume Designers Guild in Los Angeles. The Costume Designers Guild is the union that represents costume designers. So when I went into union contract negotiations for the Costume Designers Guild, I was very disturbed to really understand how little understood our work was by the industry and by the public. I started teaching at film schools, and I started teaching young filmmakers what costume designers do. I also started thinking about writing books. So I started working on a big book that turned into a book called Dressed, A Century of Hollywood Costume Design. And around that same time, I thought, well, maybe I could do a really grand costume design exhibition. So the idea behind the exhibition, Hollywood Costume, came from being president of the Costume Designers Guild and being so frustrated that the audience and the industry had such misconceptions about what costume really meant. The Hollywood Costume Exhibition is filled with work by costume designers whom I admire tremendously. There's not one costume in the exhibition that I don't absolutely adore and that doesn't have a part to play in the exhibition. Everything in that exhibition is there for a reason. I have a few favorites, but I have to say Fight Club is a favorite combination for me. It's a contemporary film. It was a fantastic film about a paranoid schizophrenic, and costume really tells that story. It's about one person split in two, and the costume designer, Michael Kaplan, told me that when he went onto the costume truck in the morning, it looked like he was making two movies, because on the left were the clothes of the narrator, right? So Ed Norton's clothes were on the left, dead boring. And on the right were the clothes of Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt. And they looked like they were completely in two separate pictures. And I think that's a remarkable contribution to the storytelling in that film. Of course, I love the Dorothy pinafore, but for a reason that your visitors will never see. The pinafore is made from the cheapest gingham available, Dust Bowl, 1939. And the designer, Adrian, must have said, could you please find me the absolute cheapest cotton, what's available on a farm in Kansas now, and stitch this up as basically as you possibly can and make this pinafore for Dorothy. If you look at that dress inside out, it is an old, worn pinafore. Absolutely right. It feels like your favorite pillowcase, so it's almost feels like chamois, and then it's just absolutely what it should be. It's very badly made, which is perfect.